Good evening, everybody. It's 2 hours ahead for me. I just came into Saskatoon for about 48 hours. It's my 4th speaking engagement. So it's been busy but great, and it's nice to be here. It's my first time in Saskatoon. I have family in Winnipeg, Calgary, and Vancouver, and unfortunately, it was unfortunate to come during this particular time. You know, it's we really send our prayers out to the people who are sick and recovering, and for those families who've had a loss. It really put Saskatoon on the map, unfortunately, not for such good things, but hopefully it'll make people also much more aware of the fact that they have to do some planning while the sun is shining. I'm just, you know, not to sort of borrow that. Anyway, I look forward to speaking today. When Curtis was talking about giving money to charity, interestingly enough, it says that 2/3 of decisions on people giving money to charity are based on their passions. They're passionate about something. Only 13% are based on tax. So it's not like the tax tail that's wagging the dog. So if you can take your passion and tax, which I'm going to help you with, we can hopefully raise a ton of money for your families and for communities. Anybody ever been to New York before? You heard something called the Lower East Side? They call it the Schmutta district, like the garment district. So there's a guy who's walking in the Lower East Side, and he sees a sign over a dry cleaner. It says, "My name is Sam Fink. What do you think? I do cuffs for nothing." So he goes inside and says, "Is it true what your sign says?" He said, "Yes." So he comes back, gives 5 pairs of pants to the guy, gets the receipt, comes back a week later, gives the receipt, gets his pants, and gets a bill for $150. He says, "What are you talking about? Your sign says you do what? It says you do this for nothing." He says, "My sign says that? What are you talking about? I read sign. My name is Sam Fink. What do you think? I do cuss for nothing?" So the reason I bring that up is because it's all about how you read things. And the Saskatoon Community Foundation, as far as I'm concerned, as are all the community foundations, are probably the biggest kept secret in Canada to wealthy individuals and just regular people who don't realize what amazing things you can be doing with a community foundation. So hopefully, thank you very much for Jen for the invitation, Carm, Joanne. It's really great to be here, and I hope to share this information. Before we do, I just want to say that, you know, for the last 2 years during COVID were the busiest time of my life. I've been in business for 30 years. So why was it so busy? Because for 30 years, I've been trying to convince people that they were going to die, and nobody believed me. And it took a global plague for people to not only be aware of the fact of their mortality, but also their incompletions, wills, powers of attorney, having an estate directory, insurance. But one of the areas is legacy. A lot of people have become successful, but they haven't necessarily translated that into significance, right? So success to significance. They've given the odd donation to somebody riding their bike to cancer, you know, conquer cancer, but they haven't actually incorporated philanthropy into their estate plans. So I'm going to share with you what I do, and hopefully if you have a plan already with the foundation, we can show you ways to monetize that or legacy, sort of leverage it more. Or if you haven't, hopefully you'll see how charity can really help you and your families as well. Now, obviously everything we speak about needs professional advice. Don't do it yourself. We've had lots of people who have read my articles in many publications who have tried to do it on themselves only to get reassessed by the CRA. And that's like reading a magazine on science and doing a brain surgery on yourself. Don't do that, okay? The world has changed a lot. In the last 20 years, it's changed dramatically. You know, 2001, we had Steve Jobs, Bob Hope, and Johnny Cash. And 20 years later, no Jobs, no Hope, and no Cash. But it's not so bad. Justin Trudeau appreciates how difficult it is for us, so he's going to be introducing a new simplified tax return for all of us with one question on it. One question. How much money did you make? Send it to us. Now, you're laughing, but we know that the reality is this is what's going on. And you as fund holders have to know about this, advisors have to know about it, and just the general public. And that is, taxes are going up. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. You'll see a tax on wealth, inheritance, principal residences, income tax. How do they pay for all the money that's being printed? To complicate things, but where there's a great opportunity, is the vast majority of Canadians have done no planning. Or if they've done planning, it's been inadequate. They haven't had a team of people to look at their stuff. The accountant never talks to the lawyer, the lawyer never talks to the insurance person. You need a team to look at things in a very holistic way. We've also moved from an information age to a misinformation age. Unfortunately, people are going online far too much to figure out what they should do, but you really do need professionals to look at your situation independently. Does anybody know, you've heard of the term Freedom 55 before in London Life? Freedom 55 today is when your youngest child is 55. Okay? You have to appreciate, and it's true, kids getting out of school, settled with debt, unless the government forgives that too, we'll see, finding jobs, trying to buy real estate. It's just not like what it was like when we were growing up, so our kids are going to be on the payroll that much longer. The good news is COVID made people much more aware of wanting to have meaning in their life, right? How do I make a difference? Especially the millennials are actually more than willing to pay more than retail if there's a social, responsible way of doing something. And the last thing is we have advisors here and we have fund holders. You guys are the ambassadors. You know, I look around here, you know, I see, let's say 30 people. I don't see 30 people. I see 3,000 people. Because each of you are connected to at least 100 people, and you're the real ambassadors for what we're talking about. So that's why it's really important that you understand this. Now, I mentioned my start was just over 30 years ago, but my real start in the business was on March the 8th, 1974. And that's when my father, of blessed memory, died of a massive heart attack at the age of 50. I was 11 years old. I was the youngest of 4 boys, and my mother, who was 48 at the time, had to go back to work to support our family. Why is that? My father was a busy engineer. Unfortunately, there was no will. We never got a chance to meet one of these good guys, these advisors. There was no will, there was very little savings, and there was no life insurance. So it was very difficult for us. We managed fine, like we had to develop that struggle muscle. But fast forward, I worked with some of the most successful business owners and entrepreneurs and affluent families, and you'd think they'd have everything all organized and together. But I'm going to suggest that 85% of the time, it's not true. They're so busy looking after everything and everyone else that when it comes to themselves, they don't have basic planning in place. That's why what we do is we do 3 things. We do estate planning, which is just making sure that people's financial architecture lines up with the current financial furniture that they have. We do tax minimization strategies, helping people to keep their taxes for their family. And then we also do philanthropy. And that's really about helping people create legacies for their family and for generations to come, often by converting taxes into charity. And that's what I'm going to really share with you. My why do I do all of this? If you know somebody by the name of Simon Sinek, if you don't, you should watch his TED Talk. He says that in life we have to figure out what's our why. What gets us up in the morning? What drives us? What makes us feel like we're relevant? For me, it's something called tzedakah. Tzedakah is a Hebrew word that is often mistranslated as charity. But tzedakah, the definition is actually social, it's justice, or it's righteousness. We have a moral and social obligation to give back to our communities. If you have something to be appreciative of, as we all do, like I look around the room, I don't think any of you have slept on a park bench recently, right? Nobody missed a meal other than by choice. Everyone has clothes on their back. That puts you in the top 1% in the world. We have to give back, because all that good that we're getting is meant to be spread around. So we've come up with a program where we wanted as a company to create $100 million of new charity every year. We did $120 million over the last 2 years, but we're really trying to create a national community of 100 professional advisors and charities where if everybody's creating $10 million and you have 100, that's $1 billion. And that could be done every year. It's like crowdfunding. So I'm very excited about building it, and hopefully the advisors in the room will join us and share their success. I wish people came to me and said, Mark, I want to give away $10 million to charity. but it has to come out of a process. And this is the process that everyone should be going through with their professional advisor, just making sure that all these things are in order, right? And then the last thing we talk about is charitable plan giving. And that is, there's an idea though that charity begins at home. A lot of people are afraid to give away their money to charity. Why is that? Why are they afraid to give money to charity?
Because their family needs it.
Their family needs it, right? Something you have to understand is when it comes to charity, people think it's going to be about disinheriting your family. But that's not what it is. It's about adopting a charity and disinheriting the tax department. Do you hear the difference? So you're not disinheriting your kids, you're adopting charity and disinheriting the tax department. That's what this is all about. So there are ways with your planning to be able to be remembered for leaving a lot of money to charity as opposed to writing a big check to Justin Trudeau. This, I think, is a very important visual for everyone in this room. My clients are very well-to-do, but this is anyone. If you look at the average upper middle class person in Canada, they've sort of passed this point in their life that unless they were to invest all their money in a penny stock or start spending frivolously, chances are they're going to have more money when they die than what they have today. If you just look at real estate going up, right? Which means that they're the custodian or trustee for the next generation. But what they don't realize is that they're partnering with the tax department on that money. So people have to go through a process to make sure they get a big check mark, that they're never going to run out of money. They know what the taxes are today, what they're going to be at life expectancy, even assuming they're giving money away to kids or buying a recreational property, and then seeing what kind of never spend money do they have, that they're just part of the tax grind on that, and then using some of that money to preserve the estate for your family or for charity or for both. That's really what people need to do. And that's because there's a lot of taxes. People don't realize all these things are all taxed, right? And in Ontario, these are the tax rates. In the Saskatchewan, capital gain rates are 5% less. The highest level income tax is about 7% less. But I'll just give you the Ontario numbers. If you have RSPs or pensions or RIFs, those are going to be taxed at over 50%. Now or at death. If you have any investment real estate or investment appreciated securities or a business, the gains are going to be taxed at about 26%, 27%. If you have corporate holdings, that's going to be taxed at 50%. Passive income, estate administrative costs. The bottom line is somebody who's worth $25 million and is feeling very, very secure, once they've done the planning, they see they're only worth $15 million. So that gets their attention. Now, while the sun is shining, let's use some of that money to make sure that they've got $25 million, or at least let's incorporate charity in the discussion. So this, I think, is very important for advisors and for as donor fund holders as well. And that is, all of us have three possible beneficiaries to our estate. Three, all of us. You've got family, you've got the government, and you've got charity. That's it. And each of us can only pick two of those. Which two would you pick? I mean, most people would say family and charity. So with proper planning, as I said, you can give a lot to your charity as opposed to writing a check to the government. Now, I just want to say that taxes are very much an important part of our society. They keep the machine running. And I saw a very, very good quote, which is, taxes are a reality, but nobody says that you have to leave a tip. Therefore, the government has given us a whole bunch of different ways to keep money for your family and for charity. So it's important that you know about that. So what we do is we create something called accidental philanthropist, or accidental philanthropy. Let me explain. There are two kinds of people, and in Saskatchewan in particular, people are extremely generous. So you've got some people who are just very generous. It's part of their DNA. You got it from church, from school, from family. They give. And then there are those people who don't. It just wasn't part of their education. But when those people realize that they have a choice where their taxes go, and they can give those to charity instead of to the government, suddenly they become accidental philanthropists. And now the people who are already giving can give more for the same amount that they were willing to pay out originally, or give the same amount for less. So it's important to understand that. Here's just a list of what we call accidental philanthropists. These are all people who can be very charitable, and your name does not have to be Bill Gates or Warren Buffett. At the top of the list are singles, divorcees, and widows. They are the most biased people in Canada. Why? Because if you have a spouse and you die, everything rolls over tax-free to your spouse, and taxes are now not due until the second to die of a husband and wife. But if you're single, widowed, or divorced, you're 1 incident away from a huge tax disposition that you should know about and do some planning to keep that money for your family or charity. Is somebody who's sold a business or will be selling a business or a farm or selling investment real estate, that year they're going to have their biggest payday. It's going to be the year of their biggest tax. It's the year that you can make the most donations to charity to mitigate those taxes. If you have anybody who's done an estate freeze or will be doing an estate freeze and is charitable, anybody, as Curtis was saying, who have appreciated securities, donating those to charity, we'll talk about that in a minute. Anyone who has a donor advised fund or a private foundation, you can take money that's already in your donor advised fund and make it way more, as we'll see, okay? Anybody that has an existing life insurance policy that they no longer need can be big philanthropists. Or if they have an estate tax bill that's going to be due on death, or they've already left a gift or a bequest in your will. These are all people that can actually be doing far more than they know and that you know. So let's talk about the simple math. In any given year, donations you make to charity can be used to offset up to 75% of net taxes payable. So if you have a tax bill, let's just say of $100,000, charity can be used to offset $75,000 of that tax bill, meaning that you're turning that tax into charity. And if you give more than 75%, you can carry forward those unused credits for up to 5 years. That pretty much everybody knows about. But the part that people don't know about is that in the year of death, charitable donations can be used to mitigate 100% of estate taxes, and those donations can be used to the previous year before somebody died as well. That means for every $2 you give to charity, you save $1 of tax. So if you're sitting there and you know that you have a $500,000 estate tax that your family's going to have to pay, wouldn't it make more sense to maybe get a $1 million life insurance policy for pennies on the dollar and donate that policy at death to charity, which would get a receipt for $1 million, and now the $500,000 tax became $500,000 of charity. How neat. There's so many different ways to sort of move the shells around. And not all donations are the same. Here's an example. Again, you can just take away a zero to make it scalable. Here's somebody who wants to give away $1 million to charity while they want to give away $1 million to charity. Either using cash, using appreciated securities with a low cost base, or using flow-through shares, or using life insurance. Now here's the key thing here, this cost. This is what a percentage of the donation, or what it costs you to actually give a donation. Does anybody here give cash checks and credit cards to charity? Worst way to give. Costs you 50 cents on the dollar. If you donate securities, it costs about 23 cents on the dollar. If you use flow-through shares, depending on if they're available and what province you're in, they can cost anywhere from 5 to 15 cents on the dollar. And life insurance, in this case, is 12 cents on the dollar. So don't think all donations are the same. There's really some great things that you can be doing. So let's talk about some gifting options utilizing your donor advised fund at the Saskatoon Community Foundation. You can give a gift in your will, often known as a bequest. You can do your RSP or RIF beneficiary, which we'll talk about. You can give securities, and you can give life insurance. Let's go through each of these to understand how they work. So the first thing is you can change your will. and include the Saskatoon Community Foundation in your will for a specific amount or a percentage of your estate. Remember, $2 to charity seems $1 of tax, okay? If you don't want to go to the trouble of changing your will, then if you have money with a financial institution and you've got an RSP or RIF, you can get what's known as a multiple beneficiary change form and change the beneficiary for a percentage or a dollar amount to your donor advised fund. Again, instead of that money going and being taxed at 53%, it's going to charity. Now, why do I bring up RSPs and RIFs? Because they are the biggest deferred tax bomb in Canada. Biggest. And people have no idea. They think, oh, I've got a $1 million RSP, I'm so rich. No, your RSP is only worth $460,000, at least in Ontario. Whether you take out the money now or you leave it at death, half of it's going to the government. So if you're charitable, there's so many ways of using either the money to donate to charity or using some of the cash flow to donate to charity now, or using the cash flow to fund insurance to pay the tax bill. Just what I'm trying to say is don't ignore it. There's a great opportunity to speak to your professional advisor and see how you can do something very special with that RSP or RIF that, you know, I meet people all the time who don't need the income from the RSP or RIF. They've got lots of other monies. The income's just going to be taxed and they're reinvesting it and paying taxes again. Now, as I mentioned to you before about cash, checks, and credit cards, what I was suggesting is this. There are better ways to give, and the government has made incentives for us to be able to use other assets to donate to charity to help us. So here's an example where somebody used to give $50,000 of cash to charity annually. That means they have to make $100,000 a year before tax, pay tax to have 50, to give to charity to save 25. But in this case, if they had $50,000 in a stock that they paid $10,000 for, if they would have sold that $50,000 of stock, they would have paid $10,800 of capital gains taxes, which means they're not really worth $50,000. From the get-go, they have to realize I'm only worth less than $40,000, okay? But the government says you can donate those stocks in kind to your donor-advised fund at the Saskatoon Community Foundation, pay no capital gains taxes, and they get a charitable receipt for the full donation. How wonderful is that? And if you want, and I'm suggesting this is something to be thinking about, especially you advisors, now that we're in the fall, between if you have any clients that are going to have a tax bill in April, from September to December, you should try to find your biggest, fattest, Bank of Canada stock, whatever, the ones that have been the most juicy, delicious gains, because 26% of the gains don't belong to you, they belong to the government. Better that you deposit it into your donor-advised fund at the Saskatoon Community Foundation, pay no capital gains taxes, and now in April, no taxes to pay. And I've got $50,000 of charity to give away, this is fantastic. And I get one receipt, I can give it to any registered charity in Canada. How fantastic is that? And that's really what we should be looking at for our clients and looking at our fund holders. Don't accept cash. Ask them, do they have appreciated mutual funds, ETFs, segregated funds, or stock? That's what you really want. And if you love the stock so much, buy it again. Just wait 30 days. Okay. Even better is if people have stocks that are inside of a company, a holding company or investment company. Same thing, no capital gains taxes. For the company, it's 100% deduction. But the real nice icing on the cake is the government will allow you to take that capital gain, in this case, that $40,000, and it gets credited to the CDA, the capital dividend account, and now that $40,000 can be taken out of the company tax-free, which saves you $20,000 of tax. And if again you feel, oh no, our kids, what are they going to get? But we just robbed them of their inheritance. Well, then maybe use corporate-owned life insurance to redeem that money back for the family. Again, using corporate dollars. The message here is, don't ignore it. Just don't ignore this stuff. We don't have a lot of tax shelters left in Canada. if we call them tax shelters. These are kind of the final four. You've got principal residences, you've got TFSAs, you've got lottery winnings. They're not taxable in Canada, so don't buy your lottery tickets in the US where they are taxed. And we have tax-exempt life insurance. Other than these, if you have any other investments, there must be somebody that you really love at the CRA who's sitting there with their hands out who wants to share in your good fortune by upwards of about 26% of your success, other than these four. So I think it would be very important to understand how these work to help your family and help your community and help your charity. So let's talk about this. This is great stuff. All of us have old life insurance policies. Maybe we took them out when the kids were young, you had a mortgage, you had a business that no longer needs insurance. Those policies can actually be donated to your donor advised fund while you're alive. And the fair market value of that policy, you'll get a receipt for that fair market value. And now going forward, you can pay those premiums either with your money in your donor advised fund or money you give to your donor advised fund to create a very large legacy for your family. So I'll give you an instance with the university I just did this with. An alumnus had a $300,000 policy he no longer needed. About 6 years before he got diagnosed with Parkinson's, so that policy was very valuable. He donated it to the university. He received a $175,000 fair market charitable donation. That saves him $87,000 of taxes, and he didn't want to pay the premiums anymore. So the charity actually found a donor to pay for that policy going forward. The university recognized the person donating the policy. They also recognized the person paying for that. That was something he ran off, saved $87,000 of tax, utilizing up an asset that wasn't on the radar for him. It wouldn't move the dial on his estate planning. But also, if you have any term life insurance, in Canada about $7 billion of term life insurance gets canceled every year because it becomes too expensive, cost prohibitive, or people don't need it anymore. But you can convert those term policies with no medical, either fully or partially, and now donate that policy to your donor advised fund or to a charity. And if your health has gone awry, these things can be valued anywhere between 10 to 70% of the death benefit. That's a big tax savings for you. So don't let, especially advisors, don't let those term policies lapse. Talk to your clients about it. Or simply, you could go ahead and donate a new policy. Say, I've got a tax bill, an estate tax bill. I'm going to buy, policy for $1 million to give to charity. That'll offset by $500,000 of tax. Or simply, just if you have insurance right now, just change the beneficiary and give a percentage or a dollar amount to the Saskatoon Community Foundation. Remember, every $2 donated will save $1 of tax. You don't have to come up with a check. You're using it on the future. Now, it used to be that charities would only recognize somebody when they got cash in their hands. But today, they'll actually recognize insurance or future planned gifts today as if they happen. So if you're looking to be able to create some goodwill with your family, your children, your grandchildren, it's a beautiful way to start creating those legacies now while you can. Here's just an example of how insurance works. On the left side, this is a 60-year-old couple who are taking $100,000 of after corporate tax money, and they're investing it at 4% for 15 years. So they're putting away $1.5 million in their corporation. At the end of 30 years, it hasn't even doubled because they're part of the tax grant. They're paying taxes while they're alive. They're paying taxes to get that money out of the corporation. On the right is very different. It's the same $100,000. What we're saying is we'd like to shelter that $100,000 from tax. So how much of that evil insurance do we have to buy to shelter that full $100,000? So in this case, you see it's about $2.5 million. So you're still putting away the same $1.5 million, but after 30 years, there's $4 million to the family versus $2 million. So you've created an extra almost $2 million that you can now give away to charity and still give your kids this, all by just moving the shelves around. And of course, for someone to get off, if you're in the investment business, To get from this side to that side, your investment advisor would have to get about a 9.6% compounded return on that money, which is probably not likely. Insurance company only has to get 4.5 or 5. It's all about tax. Okay? Here's a big secret, as I've been trying to say before, but life insurance can be owned and paid for by a private foundation, a charity, or your donor advised fund. That means if you already have a donor advised fund and you have money in it, you can actually buy insurance where it's owned by your donor advised fund. You're using money that you've already gotten a tax break on that's sitting in that fund, and your fund is the beneficiary of that policy. That means you can create so much more money for your family just by using money that's already sitting in your fund. Here are just some other strategies. I think everyone knows or should know that you can also have a private foundation, which is really for people who are going to put away at least $1 million into a foundation. There's some setup costs and annual reporting, but you have a lot of independence in terms of where you invest that money. Or if you don't want to get that way, that's where you can take the Saskatoon Community Foundation, which is an umbrella, and you can put your named foundation underneath their umbrella. And then use that almost like as a private foundation. Something you should all know, it's very neat, but a private foundation is actually public, and a public foundation is private. That means if you go onto the CRA website right now and look up all these famous people's foundations, you'll see exactly how much money they have in it, who they give the money to, who's on their board, how much of an investment return there's been. Whereas with a donor advised fund, it's completely private. Nobody knows any of that information. So if you already have a private foundation, we have a lot of people who will take that private foundation money and move it over to the Saskatoon Community Foundation to not have the reporting and fiscal responsibility, and they want the autonomy as well. A few other things, private company shares. I always get nervous with these conversations that I want everyone to have a drink, but I don't want to give you a fire hose to have that drink, right? And I realize a lot of this stuff is a lot. So I'm just going to try to keep this last part. If we know about donating public securities, but you can also donate private company shares. So if anybody's done an estate freeze where they've frozen the value of their company and passed along the growth to their family, let's say through a trust, those private shares can be donated to charity. So as an example, an advisor introduced me to a family that had done an estate freeze at $28 million, and they had a $7 million tax. And they were asked, would you consider philanthropy? And they said yes. So we met. Instead, they're going to be giving a $14 million donation to charity. There's no tax, so $7 million is gone. And the icing on the cake is that there's $6 million of tax-free dividends that are going to be available for the next generation. And all of that costed them just under $2 million to do. So for just under $2 million, instead of giving $7 million to the government, you're giving $14 million to charity. So if you know anybody who's done an estate freeze or will be, talk to them about that. The GPS, the gift pension strategy. A lot of people need money for their lifestyle, right? They want to give money to charity, but they need money today. So this strategy involves the intersection of annuities, life insurance, tax, and philanthropy. But the way it works is this. Let's say somebody wants to give $1 million to charity or to their donor advised fund. Imagine you could set it up that you can create $1 million gift and they could be receiving a return every year on their money of over 9% guaranteed for life without any interest rate risk or any market risk. Imagine that. So you've got $1 million gift and they're bringing in, let's say, $45,000 of income every year, guaranteed. If they don't need the $45,000 every year and they just want to have that $1 million gift, why not give that $45,000 a year to their donor advised fund? Now they save a whole bunch of taxes every year. Or take that $45,000 and buy another policy for $1.7 million, and now they're giving $2.7 to charity. Or the one I like the most is imagine going up to a client or to you and saying, I would like to show you a strategy where you can give $1 million to charity and your family gets back $1.7 million. $1 million to charity, but your family gets back $1.7 million. Because we're going to use that $45,000 to create another policy for $1.7 that your kids are going to get, and the charity's still going to get $1 million. We call that the GPS. It's, again, not for everybody, you have to understand. Last couple, CPP philanthropy to me is our favorites. We created this back in 2017. In Canada, when you turn 65, you're entitled to receive Canada Pension Plan. You can take it as early as age 60 or as late as age 70. Wealthy people generally don't need the money. They kind of go, oh, I'm a pensioner now, you know? I got money, right? It's cute. But they don't need the money. So they're paying taxes on it, they're reinvesting it, and they're paying taxes again. They also have to realize that when they die, the CPP also ends. So if you're philanthropic, how would you like to create some great charity or charity for your family just using the government benefits? So we call that CPP philanthropy. A 65-year-old couple get about $26,000 a year. With that $26,000 a year, they could fund a $1.5 million life insurance policy. If that policy is owned by their donor-advised fund, then the $26,000 is considered a charitable donation. So they pay no taxes on that. Now they've got $1.5 million gift. Or the second option is take the $26,000, pay taxes on that, but get the $1.5 million gift and give it to your charity when you die, which would save your estate $750,000 of taxes. The third one, which I really like, is use the CPP, get the $1.5 million policy, make your children the beneficiary of that, and donate your registered money to charity. Now your kids get 50% more, and all your registered money becomes charity as opposed to half of it going to the government. And the last one I like very much, I call this the charitable or pension plan for grandparents, for their grandchildren. Take the CPP, get the $1.5 million insurance policy, make your grandchildren the beneficiary of it in a trust or with your investment advisor, and then it's invested, let's say, at 5%. So it's going to generate $75,000 a year in perpetuity for your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. So it's a pension, and have your grandchildren use that money to give to charity or use it for their education. But I think you'd be remembered for doing something like that. And that's just taking something you're giving no attention to and creating something very meaningful with it. So something to keep in mind. Last couple of things you can buy. You can make a donation to your charity, like to the Saskatoon Community Foundation, where you have an insurance policy that goes to the charity foundation, and when you die, your family gets back all the premiums. So donation, the premiums all came back to you. Or we also have people who would like to give a donation to charity and save taxes. We call this the one-pay policy, where they could go ahead and give one payment to the charity that owns a policy, and they get a charitable receipt, and there's no taxes on it. So we just did something for a couple, 65. They gave $420,000 to charity. It cost them $210,000, and they had $1 million gift. So for $200,000, they had $1 million gift for the charity. Beautiful. And the last one is really, we call it the gift maximizer. It's just people always think that insurance only benefits a charity when you die, and a lot of charities feel that way. But there are ways to use insurance to actually create a cash flow to those charities while you're alive through the dividends, or where the charity actually can use the cash value as a line of credit to use while you're alive as well. So that's the whole idea. Take the blindfold off. Not all things are how you perceive them to be. We've recognized in our business there's probably 5 different types of givers. There are 5 types of givers. Some people give, they want to be completely anonymous. Don't put my name anywhere. If you do, I'll never give to you again. Those are neat people. Then there are those people who do it because they want to set an example for other people to follow in their footsteps, right? I want to set the bar. Others want to do it because they want to be remembered. It's kind of like immortality, their name's on something connected to them. Others do it because they want to save taxes. And for others, they do it because it's great for business. If you're a philanthropic advisor, or a philanthropic business owner, it's really good for business. So I'll give you an example here. This philanthropic advisor on the bottom had a 31-year-old advisor in southwestern Ontario that I was mentoring, and I told him and his wife to buy $1 million life insurance policy. And I said, what's the biggest charity in your area, which is the Peterborough Hospital Foundation. So they bought the policy, they donated it to the Peterborough Hospital Foundation. Their net cost every year is $3,000 for 20 years. So for $60,000, they're recognized for giving $1 million to charity. Not only are they recognized for that, but they're invited to the major donor events for people who actually write checks for $100,000, which are the people that these advisors want to meet, right? Which is amazing. And now they put him in the newsletter, and he's also now the co-chair of the Young Professionals Council at that foundation. All by just doing something so simple. And you can do this with your own foundation, your own donor advised fund. Anybody who's sold real estate or sold their business, think of farmers. Let's say you've got a farmer who sold their farm for $8 million, and there's a $2 million tax. If they're philanthropic, wouldn't it make more sense to take $4 million of that 8, give it to charity? Now the $2 million of tax becomes $2 million of charity, right? And then use insurance to put the $4 million back into the pockets of your children, the next generation. So for small amounts of money, you create money for the family going forward, but you've created a legacy that your children and grandchildren can access going forward. And I'm just going to go forward. Here's an example of a couple who gave $1 million to a charity. I think their net cost every year was $5,000 over 20 years, and they get that big check, and everybody thinks that they give $1 million. It'll look great on social media. And it's great for a lot of people to copy, and a lot of people did copy that. I just want to end here by asking a question. How many people in this room know the names of their grandparents? Show of hands? Everybody, right? How many in this room know the names of their great-grandparents? Much less. This is actually a picture of my great-grandparents, Aaron and Liba Gross of blessed memory, in 1934 in Poland, unfortunately before they died in the Holocaust. But imagine if on January the 1st, you received an envelope in the mail, and inside that envelope was a check for $10,000 from your great-grandfather. You think you'd remember their name? So there are ways with proper planning to be remembered like that. You know, they say that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. That's when the weather conditions are perfect. But when it's windy, the apple is far from the tree. And when there's a tsunami like there is today, the apple doesn't even know it came from a tree. Charity, much like religion or both, are a way to pass along those feelings of legacy, of values, of morals, of responsibility. More so, not so much for our children, but really for our grandchildren. And they say that we live once, but we die twice. I understand dying once, but when's the second time you die? It's when people stop talking about you. They stop mentioning your name. So there's never been a better time than now while the sun is shining to sort of get all this stuff organized and make sure that you're optimized and take advantage as much as possible of what the government's offering to convert your taxes into charity. I'm going to give you my next steps. These are my next steps for you. One is the 48-hour rule, which is in the next 48 hours, if you said something that resonated with you, that made sense, do something about it now. If you don't, wah, 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 you're just back to life and you won't do it. So take advantage. Contact Jen. She's the gal, you know? And she can help you to magnify your donor advised fund or get one started. Or all you advisors have to know how the foundation is really the biggest kept secret. Our service is we offer a 30-minute no obligation consultation for donors of funds and their professionals to help to figure out what's the most cost and tax effective way to go. Curtis can do it. Anybody involved, just reach out to somebody. And connect with me on LinkedIn. I have, over 11,000 contacts. I'm always putting out information about charity. That's how Jen and I met, and started dating, so please.
Didn't say we started.
Yeah, that's how all the rumors start, okay. But connect with me, I'm always putting out case studies and gifts that are done, etc. I also have a bunch of one-pagers and tax letters that were printed, and they're gonna be available at the end for people, which really are case studies on all those cases that we spoke about today, so you'll learn a bit more about that. Please go online. I did a TED Talk in 2019 called The New Philanthropy, and it's a 26-minute presentation. I think you'd really enjoy that, but learn about it and collaborate. Reach out to us, but don't ignore it. There's just far too much lying on, or sort of sitting on the line here. And if you're an advisor, join our $1 billion plan giving program. We also have a mentoring coaching program called Power of Platinum that's going to be starting in October. And the last thing is consider your own legacy gift. Why don't, if we get 30 people here, we can create $30 million. Here's an example of somebody giving a $1 million gift of insurance, and based on the ages 30, 40, 50, and 60. And this is on a single life, a non-smoker, payable for 10 years only. And those are the after-tax costs every year for 10 years to leave a $1 million gift to charity. If it was a joint policy on a husband and wife, these costs could be reduced by anywhere between 30 to 40%. So there's a lot of power in this. And that's really the wrap in terms of my discussion tonight. I'm very happy to answer your questions. I would love to finish with one story, and then everybody can go home. See if the Blue Jays won tonight, So it's a true story about a guy named John Kluge. John Kluge was a billionaire, multi-billionaire. At one point, he was the wealthiest man in America. He died about 5 years ago at the age of 94. He was asked, what was the greatest accomplishment of his life? Asked of a billionaire. And listen to the story he said. He had read that there was an 11-year-old boy in the UK who was dying of an inoperable brain tumor. And this boy had taken it upon himself that he wanted to break the Guinness Book of World Records by receiving the most amount of get well cards. He actually ended up collecting 35 million, okay? But John Kluge read this, he sent a card to the family, and he said, listen, I'm a pretty wealthy guy. I happen to know an oncologist in Pennsylvania that had been funding gamma knife treatments. It's still an experimental, and I'd like to send the boy there for another opinion. The family agreed. They sent the boy to England, or to Pennsylvania. The doctor checked him out, and he finished his diagnostics, and he said, it's not looking good. This boy, there's a good chance that we do the procedure, he might not get off the table. And John Kluge went to the doctor and he said, doctor, if this was your son, your only child, and this was the only option you had, would you do the surgery? And the doctor thought about it for a moment. He said, yes, he would. And the boy was operated on, and guess what? The boy lived. If he died, this would be the worst story in the world. You guys would kick me all the way back to he lived for the rest of his life. He's so appreciative to this guy, John Kluge. And John Kluge, the billionaire, said that was the greatest accomplishment of his life. Not everybody can be a John Kluge. And not everybody can be a Bill Gates or Warren Buffett. But for very small investments in time, you can actually create a lot of good in this world to help a lot of people who really need it. And if you can do it just by converting taxes into charity, all the better. So I encourage everybody, please reach out to Jen, look into your own planning, and if I can help you at any time, please reach out to us. Curtis, any advisor that you have in this province that is involved with philanthropy, and I wish you all the best, blessings, and we should have good health, and we should only hear from good news in Saskatoon going forward from now on, okay? Thank you very much for having me.